Hi, it's Harry from MONDE SPORTIF with Nicholas, or Nick, whichever you prefer. We are talking about the Euros 2024 in Germany as part of our preview series, and this episode is on Germany. So, first of all, it's you've got to start with this, really. It's not been the best of times for German national team recently in tournaments. I think they've gone out of the group stages twice. They've gone out of round of 16 as well in the Euros, I believe the last Euros, if I remember correctly. So, how does Nagelsmann change the fortunes of what was a formidable side, but now seems to have fallen off a bit?
It's actually kind of hard to tell because, well, Germany didn't have to qualify for this tournament as they are playing at home, so they've mostly been playing friendlies. Performances have been better under Nagelsmann. I mean, under Flick, you had really a dreadful run of games where Germany lost to Belgium, they drew against Ukraine, lost to Poland, lost to Colombia at home, lost to Japan. So since Flick was given the boot as the first ever DFB coach in over 100 years of history, things have been looking slightly better. I mean, there's still been a couple of losses though, under against Turkey and Austria, and now, well, Nagelsmann has sort of been getting better results in friendlies than Flick has. I mean, they've won against the Netherlands, they've won against France, so things are looking slightly better, but it's kind of tough to read too much into friendlies, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I guess one of the things that is positive is the fact that there's certainty around the managerial position in terms of there was interest from Bayern and Nagelsmann's committed his future to Germany for at least the short-term future. How important is that in avoiding a Lopetegui situation a la Spain in 2018? I know it's not quite the same, but sometimes when you have clubs poaching for a manager and it happens just before a tournament, it can be real disrupting.
Yeah, it can be, and I mean that Bayern job seems to be the least popular job in European football right about now. As shortly before we started recording, Ralf Rangnick actually said, "No, I thank you, but no thank you." And I think Rangnick even shows the exact same words as Nagelsmann, saying that this is not a rejection of Bayern, but I'm keeping the job I'm having. Um, which is kind of funny if you reject them. But no, I think it's important that Nagelsmann stays put. I think it brings a lot of calm to that team. He can sort of plan a future, look at it a little bit more long term. There's also going to be a bit of a generational shift going on after the Euros because if Mats Hummels plays, it will be his last tournament. He won't be there in 2026. Ilkay Gündogan, maybe the same. Same with Tony Kroos. I think he's just come back because he wants to play the Euros at home. So, I mean, he has to integrate a lot of new and young players. And to have basically the coach who is considered to be the biggest coaching talent that Germany has on its hands right now. I mean, he's only 36. Is probably a good thing for the DFB and a good thing for the players. So all things considered, yeah, I think it's great for the German national team that they do have that they can plan their future with Nagelsmann now.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously his young age. I remember him doing wonders at Hoffenheim and how well he evolved. But obviously, the biggest job that he's had previously is the Bayern job, and we have to discuss Bayern because so many of the German players have gone through that system and continue to go through that system. Really, not the best of seasons, but things are on the up, and now that things are on the up in terms of they could win a Champions League, their results are turning a bit more positive in the league, even though there's nothing to play for. How does that help create a more settled atmosphere for the German national team? Obviously, it's not Bayern isn't the only people in the team, but there is a big core element with the team, and Musiala in particular will be influential. How does that help?
Well, I think it's great for the German national team as it's probably a good thing if players like Sané, Gnabry, Müller, Musiala, who you mentioned, if Manuel Neuer, if they're going out on a high note. But all things considered, what what has shown itself to be a problem in the past for the German national team is frictions within the team. And I think, objectively speaking, the quality in terms of the players that you have at hand is there to, get out of the group stages and maybe go into at least a quarterfinal, if not a semi-final. And handling those, internal frictions was actually the biggest part of Jogi Löw's job back in 2014. He did it well back then. They won the World Cup. 2 years prior, in 2012, the German national team was filled with internal frictions, went out in the semi-finals against Italy. So, all things considered, that is probably one important job that Nagelsmann has to face. But if all players that he takes into his squad end the season on a high note, is always a positive. And there are a lot of other players who could end their season on a high note as well. I mean, Florian Wirtz and those guys from Leverkusen, they might still win the Europa League. I mean, they're facing Roma today as we record. And then there's a guy like Niklas Füllkrug who plays for Dortmund, and the Dortmund bunch. They might actually get into Champions League final. Just won 1-0 against Paris Saint-Germain. So if the German guy, if those guys from the big clubs really end their season on a high note, I think handling those internal frictions is going to be a lot easier for Nagelsmann.
And the internal frictions is an interesting thing. I wasn't fully aware of that, but I know for the English team, historically, when we had Gerrard and we had Lampard and we had Terry and we had Ferdinand, the league campaigns were so bruising and so tight. There was a difficulty with the chemistry, which isn't the same with the England national team now, Bellingham and Kane's incident aside. But do you think the fact that it's a home tournament that will really galvanise and concentrate minds so that they're not thinking about club football? There is the very much that tunnel vision.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the first Euros that Germany is playing on home soil since 1988. So this chance doesn't come around in most players' lifetimes. I mean, there's been a lot of brilliant players who played in the German colours for the last 36 years. None of them have had this chance. So I think the players are probably going to be fully aware of the fact that this is a once in a lifetime thing that they're very privileged to experience. And the last time Germany had a home tournament back in 2006 during the World Cup, the German national team was actually in tatters, much worse than it is today. I mean, they had that friendly against Italy, which they lost 4-1, one of the worst performances in the history of the nation, really. And they ended up being carried by the crowds and the atmosphere within the country, and ended up in third and overperformed. And I mean, it's funny how these things work, because sometimes that wave of enthusiasm from the crowd, from being on home soil, can actually propel you towards a much better finish than you actually would have achieved if you played elsewhere. So yes, it's definitely a factor.
And lastly, just to touch upon the age of the side, how do you look at the health of the team, not just for this tournament moving forward? Because you've got Florian Wirtz, you've got Musiala, you've got players you can build a team around, but there's still Hummels to be replaced, Muller to be replaced, Cruz to be replaced. So the core spine of the team, how confident are you that there's going to be that next wave of talent? Because we're still seeing players who've been around the setup for the last 14 years or so.
Yeah, and I mean, at the time when Pascal Gross, who usually plays at Brighton, was given his first nomination at the tender age of 31, I sort of commented on the fact that well, it might speak to the fact that the German youth setups haven't produced as many talented players as they did back in the early noughts. I think the DFB and the people working within German youth football are aware of the fact that production of talent has sort of halted a bit. It's been it's not been the production line that it was around, between 2008 and 2015. I mean, that decade basically was brilliant in terms of output, but ever since it's sort of been drying up a little bit. Other nations have been producing more talent, among them England, France, and that is definitely a concern for the DFB, and they say so themselves, and they're looking at ways of how they can improve output. And yeah, these guys are going to be tough to replace. I think both off the pitch and on the pitch. In terms of Müller, it's probably a bigger factor to place him off the pitch, as he's a very influential figure in the dressing room who, might not get as many minutes as he used to in the past. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one, and Nagelsmann is probably faced with the fact that he has to be creative in terms of his player selections going forward, because when you take a closer look at this current setup, I think you're all right in terms of the strikers and the attacking players that you have. But once you get to that critical defense, you see that the German players at hand going forward are probably not world class. So that is probably going to be Nagelsmann's biggest headache going forward.
Well, thank you very much for that insight, Nick. It's very helpful and very insightful as well, of course. I would like to wish you the best of luck with the tournament. Obviously, I'll be rooting for England, but at the same time, it's always nice when a home nation gets out the group and goes deep into the competition, because it's such a big carnival atmosphere in the host cities. So good luck, and thank you very much for your time.
No problems at all. And well, we both of us will probably be rooting against Scotland come the 14th.
That's the second Scotland jive, and it's quite funny because my colleague Charles is a Scotland fan, so I'll pass that on as well. We will be rooting against the Scots. Thank you very much for that.
Great, thanks ever so much.
Bye.